And there you go, 2 identical legs. Now we're just going to use this exact same approach to set the sled up for the back legs, cut both of those, and then again for the third top apron stretcher part of the leg. Now, hey, Sean, I don't feel like this desk situation's really working out anymore. I guess I just feel like maybe I'd be happier with something else. I mean, you get it, right?
Yeah, I get it.
Awesome.
This is nice, right?
Yeah, I think this is gonna work out. If there's been one theme or repeating pattern so far with the pieces that I've designed for plans, it has undoubtedly been options. And this piece definitely didn't buck the trend. Let me show you what I mean. So here it is, the Desquire desk, named thusly because it was built for a lawyer client, aka an esquire. Get it? Desquire? I'm a dad. Anyway, here it is in its simplest configuration. And if you build it like this, obviously you could put the detached cabinet anywhere you like, be it on the side, underneath, on top, probably not the best idea, or heck, you could even leave it at the lumberyard and forgo building it altogether. Additionally, if your desk isn't going to be up against a wall, you could put some detail on the backside, like these adjustable shelves to display some items. All that said, in this video, we're not going to be building the desk this way. And instead we'll opt for a configuration where the cabinet is actually attached to the desk. And here, again, there are some options. Most notably, some wiggle room as to where the cabinet attaches to the leg. But bottom line, there are lots of ways that you can put this desk together. Way too many to cover in this video, so we'll stick with this configuration, and if you're interested in building this desk and getting into a level of detail that's way too, well, detailed for a 20-minute video, then I'd encourage you to check out the plans. We cover everything really thoroughly over the course of 23 chapters and a bunch of drawings and technical information, so I'll have a link in the description for anybody interested in checking that out. In either case, let's actually start cutting some wood. So in these shots, I've been going through all of my material and figuring out exactly where I want to get all of my pieces from. And once I've got that determined, putting some panels together. In total, I made 7 of them, and those would be for the desktop, the privacy panel, the cabinet sides, the cabinet top and bottom, and the cabinet center panel. So while the glue is drying on those, we can start working on our legs. I mean, for the desk. So we'll start off by prepping some blanks, which will yield our 6 pieces that'll make up the 2 leg subassemblies. On the front leg blank, I'm going to measure and mark out a 25-degree angle on both ends so that I end up with a parallelogram shape. And eventually we're going to cut these off, and that'll determine the angle at which the leg leans. But before we do that, I'm also going to mark out the taper that I want on each end of one side. So for example, this one is going to go from about 1.5 inches at the bottom to 4 inches at the top. And we're going to go ahead and repeat these steps for the other 2 blanks to mark out our back legs and our top stretcher piece. To make the angled crosscuts, we can use a miter saw or a table saw with a sled. Something like this Rockler crosscut sled is perfect for this kind of stuff. But if you don't have one, any regular miter gauge will work just as well. Basically, we're just going to lock in an angle and make a cut on both ends to create the parallelogram. To cut the tapers, you could use a tapering jig if you have one, but we're gonna do it using a makeshift sled that'll hold everything in the perfect position and is repeatable so that you can make an infinite amount of these identical pieces. But we only need 2 of each for this piece. In these shots, I'm preparing to cut in my joinery for the leg sub-assemblies, and we're going to be using an angled lap joint. And because the leg pieces are 1.5 inches thick, and the stretcher pieces are only 1 inch thick, it'll make for flat faces on the inside, but this staggered detail on the outside that I think adds some visual interest. Next, we're going to make 3 aprons, which we'll use to attach the 2 legs together. And each one is going to be a slightly different shape to better match the angle of the base. It's a detail that most people won't ever really notice, but it'll be nice if they do. Now, because of the configuration that I'm building, I'll have to wait until close to the end of the build to actually glue these together. So I'm going to cut my joinery in now, and then just set them aside for a bit while I make the top. And I'm going to do it predominantly using the domino. That said, we're going to cover how to do it using dowels or pocket holes. And really, you can use pretty much any method that you prefer for this. Okay, so we had already put the desktop panel together, and now I'm going to scrape the glue off of it and sand it with 80 grit just to get it nice and flat. And then from there, it's really just a matter of cutting it to its final size and putting this chamfer detail on it. Okay, now let's set that aside so that we can build the cabinet, which is going to consist of a top, bottom, 2 sides, and a center panel which will be biased towards the back side. On the front side, we'll install 3 drawers. And on the back side, we'll have some adjustable shelving. Also, on both the front and back of our box, we're going to add an inside bevel detail to all 8 edges. And then on our drawer fronts, we're going to add a bevel along all 4 edges of each drawer. And we'll also cover making these custom handles, which again can be altered if you prefer, or eliminated altogether if you want just some off-the-shelf pulls. Your call. Okay, so one of the biggest variables with this cabinet is the decision to build it out of plywood or hardwood. So we actually have 2 separate chapters in the plan that cover each option individually. And I also put a video out a few weeks ago where I went over building boxes for furniture that dives pretty deep into hardwood versus plywood, so I'm going to link that video below. But in either case, plywood or hardwood, the box is going to be the same dimensionally and aesthetically. So everything that we do beyond making them, like fitting in the drawer boxes and drawer faces, is all going to be universal. So you'll be able to get the job done simply. And safely, for that matter. And speaking of that, let's take a second to thank SimpliSafe for sponsoring this video. So SimpliSafe makes home security systems that are easy to set up and intuitive to use, and that make sure your home is safe. They protect like a pro thanks to a variety of factors. Things like having 24/7 professionally monitored systems, so that in the event of a break-in, they receive highest priority police dispatch. Additionally, they cover the home comprehensively, inside and out, thanks to products like their video doorbell and cameras in unison with glass break sensors and everything else that they offer. And those are just a few of the reasons that SimpliSafe is the #1 expert recommended home security, and why over 3 million people rely on them daily, including me. I've been using them since I had hair. Daily, including me. See? Now, we've personally had our system for over a year now, and it's been fantastic. We started off with window and door sensors, glass break sensors, cameras, and the basics, and have since expanded to include the video doorbell and the Simply Safe lock, which has been really cool. It does things like verifies that our house is locked using a timer and lets us keep track of who comes and goes and even set unique codes for special circumstances. So if you've been thinking about getting a home security system, or even if you have a system that you think could be better, you owe it to yourself to give Simply Safe a look. They have fair, honest prices with no hidden fees and no contracts, so you can opt out at any time. So put a system together and see if it's right for you. All right, thanks Simply Safe. All right, so at this point we have all of our major components built, but we still need to get everything assembled. And the first step is going to be attaching our leg subassembly to our box. So I'm going to mark out a position for where I want it, and then hold the leg subassembly up to the box itself and transfer a line for where to cut the leg. To attach them, I'm going to be using these expandable washers and threaded inserts. And the reason that I'm doing this is because I built my box out of hardwood, and this will allow for the top panel to expand and contract along the width without any issues. And also this will enable me to take the desk apart so that moving it'll be a lot easier. Anyhow, after marking a few pilot holes in my leg, I can go ahead and cut in some threaded inserts and mortise in my washers. Now with everything dry assembled, I can size my privacy panel. And I would say that it's this step, along with the last step of attaching the box to the leg, that make the one-legged version of the desk more complex than the two-legged version. But hey, don't take it from me. Take it from the more authoritative version of me, from Chapter 2 of our plans, Project Overview. Now, I'm going to say right at the top that the two-legged version with the box detached is by far the simpler version of this project. I would say it's honestly significantly simpler. And it's honestly probably the more... But all that said, and this is just my opinion, I think that the one-legged version with the box attached looks a little bit nicer. Okay, so moving on to some specifics with the one-legged version, the first thing to mention is that the privacy panel is totally optional. Structurally, you don't need it for this version, so I'd only put it there if you think that you'll use it to maybe hide some wires behind, or if you're just worried about people looking at, well, whatever goes behind the privacy panel. Okay, thanks, Chris. So I guess the important takeaway from all of that was that this panel is easy to include in the two-legged version and difficult to include in this version, but also not necessary in this version. So you might be thinking, what's so hard about this? Why not just throw some dowels or dominoes in there and glue it and... Actually, you know what? Hit him with it, Chris. Why not just throw some dowels or dominoes in there, glue it and clamp it up and call it a day? And you could do that, but I think that it would just make the piece too big and heavy to move around. So I really wanted to use some sort of knockdown hardware to put it together. Another option could have been a few pocket screws through the panel and into the leg or cabinet on their respective sides, which would work, but I was worried that over time it might start to lose its grip a bit. And also, since I'm not the person keeping this piece and I'm not going to have access to it, I just wanted to make sure that I did something that was definitely a long-term solution. Even though what I'm showing is specific to the domino, a lot of the techniques that I used to help position my pieces and mark up where things would go would apply to using pretty much anything. And also remember that this part is totally optional. So if it's, God, okay, yes, we get it. It's hard, but it's optional. Let's move on. Moving on, and with my panel cut to size, I'll need to mark and cut everything into my privacy panel first, and then into my leg and the inside face of the cabinet. And there's a lot of measuring and marking and relative math here, and a lot of what gets covered is pretty universal to just sort of laying things out in general. And as I say in the plans, this part is totally optional. You can just skip this part. Okay, let's get to it. So at this point, my Okay, we're on the final stretch here. The last few things to do are, first, finally we can glue our aprons between our two, or well, I guess 1 and maybe a 7th leg subassemblies. And then after we clean those up, we can get everything finish sanded and finished. And then we can do our final assembly. So at this point, we have the following pieces: a base subassembly, a top, a cabinet, 3 drawers, a privacy panel, and 2 adjustable shelves. We'll attach our base to our top using some figure 8 desktop fasteners. And our privacy panel to our cabinet using our knockdown hardware. Then we can attach these 2 large pieces together with the knockdown hardware and the threaded inserts. And then reinstall all of our drawer hardware, take care of any fine tuning needed, install our adjustable shelves, and we're done. So while we look at some finished shots of the build, I'd like to thank a couple people. Alright, this is starting out rough. Gasper Florhanchik, Aaron Jenkins, that's easy. Adrian Orozco, now we're on a roll. Sahan Malagi, losing it a bit. Dan Schmidt, back on track. Angel Ramos, or maybe Angel, getting cocky here. Richie Morrison, right in my wheelhouse. Alex Robertson, you're making this too easy. Zachary Wider, okay, I could have thought that was Wilder if I didn't look closely. Demetris, not Demetrius, Brandon Richard, and scanning the names ahead, doesn't look like there's any more road bumps, so let's see if I can bring it home. Larry Warren, Edgardo Galindo, Jay Van Velzen, Laura Underwood, Anthony Renteria, Byron, Eric Edwards, Judy Lynn, Jake Kugel, Scott Oram, Gary Widdop, Matt Harris, Brandon Ford, Joseph Sass, Chris Waite, Jake Dawkins, Jeremy Kerber, Jason Lopez, Matthew Kunkel, and last but certainly not least, On Nokle. Anyway, to all of you and the rest of my Patreon supporters, thank you so much for helping me to make these videos possible. All of you should either have received or be receiving your t-shirts in the mail very soon. And just honestly, thank you. Also, don't forget that if you guys want these plans, you get a discount bigger than the amount of your monthly pledge at the $10 and up tiers. So for anybody that wants to find out more about that, there's a link to my Patreon page in the description. And if you want to check out the plans, there's a link to that as well. So thank you again for the support, or just watching, and for making all of this possible. All right, I'll see you in the next one.